I do get really involved in what I'm doing. I really immerse myself in my topics. But also there's this wonderful nature of just creating things, making things. And I think it's something that's always been very mystical for people, for anyone creating anything, whether it be music or literature or whatever. You know, bringing your ideas and making them work so that they communicate a message, so that others can receive that message. And I enjoy turning on my jazz, coming into my studio in the morning with my paints and my brushes and my mylar and just getting to work. I'm Nanette Carter. I'm an artist. I live in New York City and I teach at Pratt Institute. My work is abstract and surreal, and the recent works now have a cartoonish flavor to them. But I'm basically an abstractionist. I want you to see some of my new pieces. The work is called Cantilevered. I normally work in a series. I've had series that have gone as high as 107 works. So once I get involved with an idea and it really sort of permeates my body, I let it flow. Right now, Cantilevered, there may be about 27 pieces, large and small. I like working large. I love working small also. I have no problems with scale. But with Cantilevered, my idea was that living in the 21st century, all of us are having so many burdens, so many responsibilities. Some of us have 3 jobs, children, elderly parents, social media, trying to keep up with all that's going on, just so much to handle. These are hard times, but they're good times, you know. And so with this series, I thought the idea of this architectural term, cantilevered, was a great way of talking about this balancing. In cantilevered, in the buildings that are cantilevered, you have a structure that is amazingly holding up this whole unit. So what I'm envisioning is that this is hitting the ground. This is the ground here. This pediment right here, along with this weight-bearing structure, is holding up this entire piece. This is a collage. And so like building a building, I feel as though I am a builder. I am putting these pieces up one at a time, just as a builder would do. Of course, I'm thinking about not only the structure, again, this cantilevered idea, but color in this instance, shapes, these forms that I have, this idea of stabilizing this unit, and kind of just the excitement and the tension of all of this going on at once. And again, I see this as the human form in many ways, as our arms are opened up, handling all of these responsibilities. What motivated me to create art was probably my mother. My mother was a dancer, and she taught dance, and so she choreographed for recitals, for her dance recitals. She taught children from the age of 6 on up to high school, so 17, 18. And we put on these huge recitals. This was in Orange, New Jersey. And seeing my mother try out her steps for these choreographed pieces, also watching her design and sew the costumes. She would sew the costumes. She was somewhat of a seamstress. And watching her work with taffeta and lace and all of these beautiful fabrics and colors and sparkly things, it just looked like a lot of fun. Of course, I thought everybody's mother did this. And I think that I thought to myself, you know, I can create things too. this idea of bringing fabric together, you know, to make this tutu, to make this outfit, looked really exciting. It was quite enticing. So I think that's what started it. And again, I probably thought everybody did this because I was about 4 or 5, and I would attend her classes. This was a way that she wouldn't have to get a babysitter, you know, and just bring me along. And at the end of the day, I think that it made its mark on my mind. And this idea of creating movements in space, moving people around, orchestrating people, was really quite interesting to see. And I thought, wow, for my mother to have that kind of control, that was also quite amazing. I didn't get the sense as a little girl that as a woman I'd have any issues doing whatever it is I wanted to do. My family was certainly supportive, and I can tell you that a lot of their friends thought they were crazy to send me off to art school. It was, how is this black child going to make money? How is she going to make a living? What is she going to do? And I always remember my mother would reply, well, she can always teach. She can always teach art. But if this is what she wants to do, then she should do it. To be a happy person, I want to support her in whatever her endeavors. And so I was very blessed to have a family that would back me on this and that would be so supportive. I can tell you that I also had very few African-American artists that I looked up to because I only knew of one in my town. There was one guy, Mr. Miller, who was the artist, the black artist in town. So I didn't know of any female artists until probably when I started to go to college and I heard about Elizabeth Catlett and a couple other folks. But I think it was really all about my mom and seeing her create. Before Cantilevered, I did a series that was called Bouquet for Loving. It had multiple meanings. It was a layered meaning to it, and it was paying homage to my mentor, Al Loving. And this was a big black man who was so kind and gracious and giving of his knowledge. He was a brilliant artist and a wonderful collagist like myself. And he was just so generous with people he knew. He introduced me to quite a few people who helped my career tremendously. I learned from him in terms of art making and the possibilities. And so I wanted to honor him. I wanted to pay homage to him. He died in 2005. So Bouquet for Loving is me not only paying homage to Al Loving, but this bouquet is in hopes of people having more respect for each other and love for each other. Back to sort of the flower child era, you know, love and peace. And hoping that we will see that we need to get back to that. There are about, I think, maybe 30 pieces in this series, all different sizes. I have one bouquet that's about 13 feet by 8 feet. So again, and small works also. This happens to be primarily a drawing. There's not as much collaging going on in this. This is one sheet of mylar that I'm drawing on. So this is actually lead pencil, color pencil, oil, stick, and there's one collaged element, and that's the element, this red-black element here. I even have a woodcut print. This is actually a print from a piece of wood, that particular flower. And as you can see, these are my flowers. These are my creative flowers. These are flowers you've never seen before. This is vegetation that is not known to man. I'm being very creative in terms of how I develop my flowers. Some of them look quite ominous. and some I think have a much more fluid and friendly feel to it. But again, sort of this cartoon-like quality that's in the work now that started probably in the late 90s. I started to use more cartoon-like imagery to tell my stories. Yeah, been very pleased to have been curated into Bridging the Gap. Wonderful title, I think, multifaceted title, very wonderfully layered title. It'll be at the Bishop Gallery. And the title, for me, again, multi-layered, is talking about the fact that we have so many talented African-American artists who have not been seen, who will not be written in the history books. And I'm speaking now not only of today, but also of the 50s, the 60s, 70s. And I know that in this show, Ed Clark is one of our senior artists who will be in the exhibit. Really pleased to be showing with him. Brilliant abstract artist, along with Norman Lewis, who is deceased, who is just beginning to get recognized with very serious museum shows across the country. Brilliant artist. I luckily had a chance of meeting him, and I guess this was probably in the early 80s or late 70s before he died. So the gap is, the bridging of this gap is the recognition that there are a lot of wonderful artists out here that have been out here for years who are not being taken seriously. I think there's also another gap that's happening with this show, and that is the fact that the curators have situated all of these different artists who are bringing different aspects of art. We have artists who are coming right out of the African diaspora in terms of the way that they're making art, the colors and patterns. You have abstractionists, you have figurative artists. So it's really showing you the broad nature of which we're tackling some of these ideas that are out here. We're not all doing figurative work. We are not a myopic people. We are just as complicated as the next group. We have different visions and different processes. And so this is also bridging that gap, linking us all, bringing us all together under one roof, which I think is quite beautiful. Also, it's a generational thing that's happening. I already mentioned Norman Lewis, who is deceased, Ed Clark, who's one of our senior artists, but we also have some of the young artists that are going to be featured also in this show. So it's bridging the gap in terms of generations. And of course, it's bridging this gap where, you know, we're just not being seen. The work is not being seen seriously. We're not being shown in the Whitney Museum of American Art. And yes, we too are American. And so again, I love the multi-layered aspect of the title and the nature of the business of the art, that we're not being sold quite as often. We're not being seen. We're not being shown. All of these sort of bridgings that are taking place in this show are quite exciting.
So,
Rolling.
can you clap for me now?
Okay.
Maybe a little
Louder.
Yeah. Perfect.
Part of my ring fell apart.
Oh, no.
Ah, it's bone, and I think it was very delicate.
No.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Do I need to clap again, or
No.
with all this going on, it's probably
That was a
enough.
mighty clap.
That was
I'm
good.
sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
It was probably going to fall apart anyway.